Welcome to the Funny Carpenter. Today we're talking tools. I'm going to let you know if the Festool Kapex is the best miter saw in the world. Now I've been using this saw daily for about the last 4 years, so I've got some thoughts. I'm going to share with you the top 5 things that I love about this saw, and then the one thing that I don't like, and the one thing that I pretty much hate. Love number 5, the fence and the table. The table is dead flat. The fence is perfectly square to the dead flat table. Something that you can almost never find on a miter saw. The fence is perfectly square. Nice tall fence as well. And the table is dead flat. I mean, you just don't find that on a miter saw. A lot of miter saws have a little bit of a dip where this little pivot piece comes in. The Hitachi miter saw that I had a swale in it, and the fence had a little bit of a bend in it. My Makita 10-inch slider that I had, this part here was lower than the rest. The DeWalt miter saw that I had, the back fence had a little bit of a lean out. It's not a huge deal, but the little bit of precision that dead square and perfectly flat adds, it just adds a lot of repeatability to all the different cuts that you make. And my favorite part about this fence is these removable pieces. You just undo the little lever here and they slide right out, no problem. I just store them down here. I've got a couple little screws that I put in. 90% of the time I'll use the saw with the fences out. And what I like about that is when I'm cutting a piece of baseboard, I can hook my finger on this back rail and it allows me to push the piece towards the blade and anchor my hand at the same time. So I'm not worried about pushing my hand into the blade. Love number 4, the dust collection. The dust collection on this saw is amazing. Now when I first got the saw, I was envisioning no dust. That's not the case. I realized this today using a 12-inch DeWalt saw that just had a little dust bag. So what the dust collection does is it takes all, like you'll still get sawdust around the saw, but it's a lot of the heavier stuff. And you're avoiding that cloud of dust that gets into your lungs. I mean, you should probably still wear a dust mask, but especially in the summer, it's a little difficult. It's got the giant dust collection shroud at the bottom here, and that's kind of the heart and soul of the system. And then yeah, the saw is just designed to work with a vacuum. So I have it hooked up to the Festool CT Mini. It's a nice combination. I have noticed that new Makita saw, they have the 2 dust port system. I've seen guys using that saw and it looks pretty awesome in the dust collection as well. All the other miter saws, no. None of them are even close to the dust collection here. The only one that compares is that Makita with the 2 ports. Love number 3. The capacity. This 10-inch slide miter saw pretty much has the capacity of a 12-inch saw. It has something called the special cutting position, which is you can lock the saw out a little bit and you can cut, I think it's up to like a 5-inch baseboard standing up. The cabinet installers that I work with, they all have the 12-inch stationary DeWalt saw. And this saw can actually cut a slightly bigger crown molding in the nested position. I think I've cut a 7 1/4 inch crown molding across the diagonal on this saw, and the DeWalt couldn't quite do it. So I was pretty happy about that. Yeah, the cross-cut capacity here is 12 inches, but this is a little trick. If you need a little extra capacity, this is a 15-inch sheet of plywood. Now this is dangerous. I probably wouldn't recommend doing this. There you go. I've always preferred to use the 10-inch saw blades, so it's nice to get that 12-inch capacity. Love number 2, the rails. The rails on this saw are rock solid. They're the best of any saw that I've used. There's very little deflection on the end of this saw. So what that allows you to do is, say you're cutting some hardwood on a bevel angle, say it's a furniture kick for a cabinet, which is a cut I make quite often. What that allows you to do, say you've got your saw flipped over, you can make with your slide saw, you can make a score cut along the top edge so you get a nice clean finish. And then you can come back and cut all the way through and you're going to have a nice cut that's all in one plane. with every other slide saw that I've used in the past, if you try to do that score cut and the double cut, it always ends up, when the saw digs into the wood, it tends to drag and deflect, and then you'll get this kind of wandering cut. And then when you try to make a perfect 45 miter out of finished material, it never turns out that great. The sliding is smooth as any saw I've ever used. So yeah, other saws that I've used in the past, I've tried to make this cut with the Bosch axle glide saw. Not great at all. Probably one of the worst. Love number one, the micro adjustability of this saw. The beveling function on this saw is amazing. And I really like the miter adjustability on this saw. It's got this little override button here that say you're cutting 45, you want to cut 45 and a half. You just override this thing and you can tap it and it's not going to hit the detent. And the nicest thing, this is something I didn't quite know about the saw for the first couple of months that I had it, is so you're at the 45, you want to adjust it. I would let go of this and then lock it in, and sometimes it would want to go back into the detent. But what I learned is you just, say you're doing your micro adjustment, you bang it over 45 and a quarter, you just keep this thing down, push it all the way down, and it never moves. If you want to just leave it in that spot, when you pull the thing up, push it down, and it won't want to clip back into the detent, which is a pretty nice little feature that I haven't seen on other saws. Usually they always want to slip into the detent. This little override lever here is pretty awesome. And it locks into place, like you can lock it wherever, and it's super solid. Some of the other saws that I've used, the old DeWalt and the Makita had that little twisting knob. That was a bit of a pain in the butt. This is a really nice system. And yeah, the miter pivoting on this thing is super smooth. I mean, you can just tell it's a super well-built little mechanism. Very nice machining on this saw. And the nicest thing about this saw, the beveling. There's no other saw that has beveling like this baby. So what you do to get the beveling happening is you just release this flap on the back, and then you have this dial. So you have 3 settings. You got 0 to 45. So it'll go down to 45 and stop, and then it will stop at a hard 90. So if you want to go the other way, you can go 45 both ways. Yeah, and the mechanism here is nice. It's kind of spring assisted to help take the weight of the saw, and it's a really nice mechanism. And a real bonus is you can just dial it over to 47. You don't have to mess around with any adjustment screws to get to the 45 and a half or 46. It goes all the way to 47. You put it in the 47 position, and then you can bevel all the way over, and you can go all the way up to, well, just past 47, and then lock it in place, and you're set. And the real crown jewel of this thing is the micro adjustability here. So what you can do, say you want to cut 1 degree, it's got this giant scale on the back here. So number one, you can see what angle you're setting the saw to. I don't know, I think every other saw on the market, the scale is tiny. You have to get, especially as you get older, it's super hard to see. So yeah, if you want to set 1 degree, it's got this little rack and pinion knob on the back here. So you can dial this thing. This knob just dials around. So you want to set it to 5 degrees, go over to 5, dial it right onto the 5. You can clearly see the gauge, lock it in place, you're set to 5 degrees. The bevel features on this saw are insane. The first thing that I don't like about this saw is the price. At $1,950 Canadian and $1,500 US, the price is ridiculous. I mean, there's no reason that this saw should be 3 or 4 times more than any other miter saw on the market. I mean, sure, it's well built and super nicely designed, but seriously, Festool, I mean, why don't you make this saw like $1,100 Canadian, and probably you would sell a lot more saws. The price is a huge turnoff. And the thing that I borderline hate about the Festool Kapex is the trigger and the little blade guard mechanism. Yeah, so in order to get this saw to work, you have to push this in. That will allow the blade guard to come up. So if you want to line up your cut that way, it's usually what I do is I'll push that in, line the tooth up with kind of the pencil mark. And like I say, I usually do approach cutting. And then you have to depress this, and then the two things click together in order to get the saw to turn on. And then if any one of those things kind of goes a little haywire, then the saw shuts off. So it's a total pain in the butt. I wish that the trigger was a lot simpler. I mean, I love the DeWalt saw where you can just pull the blade guard out of the way with your thumb, and then you can sight the blade teeth like a rifle right onto your mark. You can't do this with this saw. This saw has an amazing laser. You can tell I use the laser a lot. It's up here. The laser is actually one of the best ones on any miter saw that I've seen, but I never used the laser. I don't know. Lasers are for losers. What can I say? The thing about a laser is it doesn't work in all circumstances. So I'm not a fan of the switch. I remember when I bought the saw, the guy at the store was like, oh, you'll get used to the switch and you'll love it. Well, it's been 4 years and I freaking hate it. Is the Kapex the best miter saw in the world? Undoubtedly it is. Is it a good value? No, not by any stretch. It's a horrible value. It's way overpriced. Would I buy it again if somebody stole this saw? I probably would. I've come to love using the saw. It's got so many things that I would absolutely miss. So I would definitely check out all the other saws very carefully, but I probably would end up missing a lot of the things that I love about this saw, so I probably would buy it again. And hey, if you're looking for a better value in tools, check out my review of the Makita track saw up here. And if you're still watching, go ahead and give this guy a punch in the face down here, and we'll see you on the next video.